Good morning, Canisius High School community. It is Andy Deyell, your Vice President for Institutional Advancement, back with another episode of Conversations with Canisius, our weekly web series where we check in with alums all over the United States and all over the world, really, and we check on what they've been up to since their time here at 1180 Delaware. I am joined today by a very special guest, Tim Rine, from the class of 1988, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. Tim is a senior wealth advisor with the White Oak Wealth Group. Tim, welcome.
I appreciate that, Andy, and looking forward to talking today. Thanks for letting me participate.
Absolutely. It's good to catch up. Class of 88, we're going to go back to 1984. You're a freshman. I believe you're at Christ the King in Snyder. And
That's
you're
correct.
Looking for high schools. Tell me a little bit about how you heard about Canisius High School and sort of what led you to attend there.
Well, it actually goes back even further than my father. It goes to his father. So if I can back up a little bit, my father told me the story that when he was being raised in the city of Buffalo, his parents were living on modest means. My grandfather was actually working at Bell Aircraft at Niagara Falls Airport in the mid 1900s. But he knew of the value of an education from Canisius. And so they did whatever they could to budget, to set time aside, to set money aside, to make it a priority to have my father go to Canisius because he knew the value. My dad went there, graduate of 66 from Canisius, played sports, lettered in baseball and basketball, good student, but the experience was one that impacted him so much that he did the same for me and my brother. So it goes back generations of just trying to shape young men to get them ready for life. And I can speak the same tune today as kind of what it's done for me. So that's really not just my father who told me about it, but his father told him about it. And it's just carried through for the last 50, 60 years.
That's great. And Tim, I'm going to out you a little bit here. Tim's a former Mr. Canisius, which means he was very involved in his time at Canisius High School. And for those of you who are alums, you know how important and what an honor it is to be named Mr. Canisius. But tell me a little bit about all of the things you were involved in as a student that helped, shape you.
Sure. So I was involved in mostly sports, also involved in the walkathon. I was grateful to be a participant and maybe a leader in that. I wanted to be well-rounded. I wanted to have a lot of activities that I think shaped me and allowed me to figure out what I wanted to do and where I think my skills were and where I could be a positive impact. So there's extracurricular wise, I played baseball for the years I was here, played varsity 3 years, was fortunate enough to play for Mr. McGillicuddy, which was a tremendous honor, as you know. I played 4 years of varsity golf, and I have a great story about Father Bellotti, who was my golf coach. And I did play basketball. I did play basketball for 3 years, in fact, but my senior year, I opted not to play. I chose not to play varsity, and I wanted to get myself ready for the spring baseball season, which played out well because we won the Georgetown Cup that year. So those are my activities, largely athletic specific, but grateful for all of those opportunities at the school.
And you mentioned Father Bellotti a moment ago. My next question is about sort of the influences. Who are your major influences while you were a student? You mentioned Connie McGillicuddy, who's of course a legendary coach here, and some Father Bellotti. But who are some of the other faculty members who you really connected with during your time?
There's a lot. So we don't have the time to go into all of them. I can tell you this. Maybe I'll answer it from a different angle. There is no teacher, mentor, leader at the school that I recall that was a negative impact on me. So everybody I had, whether it was directly in the classroom or on the field, was instrumental in my experience. I go back to Father Bellotti. I'll tell a story at the end, which speaks to his character and what I think is indicative of some leaders at the school. But Mr. Luceni, Dean of Students, he was fantastic. And I wasn't in his office very often, thankfully. But when I was there, I was seeking guidance. I kind of view him as a stern advocate for students when he was there. Wanted to hold the line, understood what Canisius stood for, at the same time, willing to kind of pour into you if you had issues. He wanted to hear about it. And that's why I spent a little time in his office, because I valued his guidance. So Mr. Luceni was instrumental. Mr. Durkin was actually my freshman year homeroom teacher. And I had an introduction to him day one when I stepped in 1984, when I stepped in the classroom, because he was almost laughing when he read my name. And I didn't know why until I went home that night and told my father, I have Mr. Durkin for homeroom. And he almost laughed as if he was relishing the opportunity. And he said, Tim, I had him when I was in school. So Mr. Durkin became good friends, enjoyed his guidance as well. Another one that comes to mind, Mr. Bob O'Connor,
Sure.
who also taught my father and coached my dad in basketball. So you think about the generational impact of some of these leaders that have been there for a long time, and seeing multiple generations come through their classroom, and took an interest in my development. Some of the others, Dr. McPherson, Mr. Kulagowski, Father Kaminsky in the math department, Father Nauman. I mean, it goes on and on. I think the thing I would think about, Andy, in terms of how all of these individuals, and those I didn't even mention, they try to stretch us, which is part of what Canisius wants to do. They want to get the most out of you and let you learn things you didn't think you could. And they push us to strive. And while they do that, they encourage it. And so I've just been grateful for that. There's others I could mention, Mr. Skipper, Mr. Gemmer in the athletic department, my coaches. Let me go back to Father Bellotti to sort of put a bow on that conversation. He was the president, for those that don't know, he was the president of the school at the time. He was also my designated varsity coach my senior year. So fast forward after I graduate, I'm wrapping up my Canisius days. And I was trying at the time to try to get a college scholarship through golf. I was doing okay. I was invited to go to a tournament in Pennsylvania, about 4 hours away. This is off Canisius time. It's a Saturday tournament, it was a weekend tournament. And my father and I drove down Friday night, and we stayed in a hotel, and I had an early to mid-morning tee time. And we are in the parking lot getting my clubs out to go to the range about an hour and 15 minutes before my tee time, about 10 o'clock, I guess, 9:30, 10 o'clock. And I look over, and getting out of his vehicle was Father Bellotti. He had driven 4 hours that morning to walk the course to see one of his students participate in a tournament. It was unrelated. This is not a Canisius event. This wasn't a team event. This was just, I was invited to come. He decided to take it upon himself to spend a Saturday or Sunday going all the way just to watch me. I don't know what I shot that day. It didn't matter. But that's a kind of story, and there's many like that folks that I was involved with and was fortunate enough to know and be led by went the extra mile, poured into us, whether it was in the classroom or outside. So I just, those are kind of the stories I think that really are indicative of what the school represents.
Yeah, and they stay with you for your whole life, right? Like, as you
That's right.
telling me now, is that you remember that so clearly and so well.
Yeah. Andy, before we move forward, I did want to take a minute, because somebody I did not mention, but thought it was very important to acknowledge him. Father Zanoni, as everybody knows, who's currently at the school, and those that have gone through the school when I was in the 80s, what kind of impact he has had on my life and everybody else's. It's amazing, whether it's at the ball field, showing up to watch a game, whether you actually drive by Delaware Park during the winter and seeing hitting fungos. It's just amazing what kind of impact he's had on my dad, who this is 2 years to the month since he's passed. Father Zanoni actually did the service and the funeral 2 years ago. Just this past week, with his anniversary hitting, he sent me an email and said, Tim, I'm going to honor your dad at Mass this morning. It's just amazing the kind of person he is. And if I didn't mention him, I know we've talked about a number of leaders, but he has not only been impactful from a Canisius perspective, but from a friend's perspective. And so I can't thank him enough for what he has meant to our family, and still stays in touch with my mother, which is fantastic. So I just want to make sure I mentioned him, because he has been instrumental.
So after Canisius, wait, tell us a little bit about where you went to school, what you studied. And there's a lot, takes a while. They end up in Atlanta as a wealth advisor. So briefly tell us a little bit about your professional journey and your time since Canisius High School.
Sure. The short answer is I've spent, call it 30 years in financial services. That's my career. But after Canisius, I went to John Carroll in Ohio. I know many people on the Zoom or on the call know that John Carroll is another Jesuit institution. I went there. It was within range, 3.5 hours away. Great business school. I wanted to pursue that. Not sure exactly in what capacity, but I went there. It was a great experience. And then my first job out of school in 1992 was with a global money manager out of Pittsburgh, Federated Investors, who gave me an opportunity to be a representative for them in the Northeast. And so I worked New York, New England in my early 20s before they transferred me here in 95. So I've been here for nearly 30 years, since the mid 90s, and worked largely in the capital markets, asset management, investment world. And about not quite 3 years ago, but in the spring of 21, I was asked by a team that I now work with, colleagues of mine, folks I've known for a long time. We're a boutique advisory group of 4 senior advisors, 2 support team members, and we are a wealth advisory team. So that's kind of where my history for 30 years has led me here to Atlanta. And I've got roots here now with my wife being from Georgia, and I can tell you more about that. But that's what my career path has been in financial services.
And what would you say some of the lessons or the influences that you took away from your time at Canisius? Like, what has helped you from Canisius High School? What has helped you in your professional life the most?
Well, I think the thing that Canisius, and I would assume every student who's gone through the Blue Doors would tell you, that you have to have a good work ethic, and if you don't, you'll learn it quick.
Mm-hmm.
So it really honed that, as Tim, you have to apply yourself, and it prepared me. It prepared me for the rigors of college and what the demands are in corporate life. So I think that's great preparation. Is it really built a work ethic and honed that. At the same time, you have to have high integrity, high ethics in terms of how you conduct yourself. So Canisius always wants to hold the line where they're building men of character. I've tried to take some of that with me, and it served me well in my business and with my family. I'm just grateful for people pouring into me and showing what that looks like, and modeling that. So Canisius does a great job of trying to build men of character.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is pretty obvious, but I'm going to state it anyway. It's amazing when you have successful young men who come through the school, whether it's in this classroom, on the field, both, or wherever they are. Could be theater, drama, could be government, whatever it is. Servant leaders, a selflessness, sort of a humility behind the success. And I'm just trying to do the best I can for my clients, and I'm trying to do the best I can for my family. And when there's things that God's bestowed upon us, to be humble in the process. So I think those are things that are traits that I saw or witnessed, and saw a lot of my friends who had those traits, and I'm just trying to bring that forward too. So
Right.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it answers it very well too. I mean, there's we all take things, food for the journey, from our different experiences along the way. And, like you, I went to college afterwards, and I've worked in a number of different places, but I find when I look back on my life that the most impactful food for my journey was here at Canisius. And so it's one of the reasons I work here now is to try to be a part of that for the next generation. So no, it's a great answer. And it's also, I think one of the things I find when I interview alums, no matter what field they're in, there's this element of similarity or sameness that goes through a lot of the response to that question. And it's heartening to know that what you had 30 years ago still impacts you greatly today. And I think telling the story is another way to keep that going and keep it alive. So thanks. It was a great answer. And the next thing I want to move on to is advice. And you were not what I would term a young man anymore, Tim. So you probably have plenty of advice to give, right?
thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Gray hair gives it away. Yes.
Well, we're both in our 50s, and so tell me a little, if you were to give advice to some young students today, young alums, people that are just starting out in the world, what are some things that you've learned along your journey that you could impart, some wisdom you can impart to younger people today?
Sure. One of the things I really cherish about, and maybe it's specific to our class, or maybe it's just the school, but we have a very close-knit alumni class. Now, when I go back for reunions every few years, our class is well represented. I love that. We go across interest lines. I mean, I was doing athletics. I got guys who were in drama, folks that were in government. They're just different skill sets, but you come together, and it's amazing the camaraderie and the relationships you built for a long time. So maybe in terms of advice or suggestions, take time while you're there and before you head out to the next phase of life to build and nurture some relationships and keep them going.
Right.
We have guys from my class of 88, we have a group text that we just kind of keep each other informed. So there's this closeness, even as we kind of go out in our own paths. So build and nurture those relationships, because to your point, Andy, I would say the same thing. Spent 4 years at John Carroll. It was a good institution, great education. My relationships were very transient. They were it was fleeting to a degree. I kind of knew people, but I didn't stay in touch to the degree I have with Canisius. I've got guys I'm 35 years ago I'm still very close to. Could pick up the phone with a bunch of them, and it's like we just talked last week. So nurture those relationships, and then do it across alumni lines or in terms of classes. It's not just specific to your class, but feel free to lean on the network within the community of Canisius, wherever you are, wherever part of the country, whatever year you graduated, be leaning on that, because there's some commonality I think everybody cherishes as a crusader. That's the first thing. Second thing is be confident. As I said, be humble, be confident though that the skills that you learned in your teens carry through. It's amazing how those traits can actually translate into the workforce. And people will see that. They should be able to recognize that, but because you've been fortunate enough to go to a school that's really poured into you and build out those traits, whether it's in the classroom or not. So be confident as you step forward into the next phase of life. The last thing I'd share is volunteer your time. If you've got some resources and you've been blessed with some treasures and some wealth that whatever your occupation provides you, if you've got time, treasure, talent, God's gifted you with things, I would encourage you to do that if you've got the time, whether it's at work, it's in your community, it's at your church, volunteer even just to coach your kids' ball club, what have you. So volunteering is a big part, pouring back into those that you can shape and mentor. Because I know that while I was at Canisius, and I've mentioned it before, a lot of leaders, a lot of folks have actually positively impacted my life, and I just want to kind of give back when I can. So those are the things I'd kind of share with folks that are thinking about what they could do as a result of their time at Canisius.
And it's like you set me up perfectly for the last question, really. And you and I have talked. You talked about nurturing relationships. You talked about being confident. You talked about volunteering, and really that feeds into something you and I talked about. Usually at this point of the interview, I ask people sort of what they're planning on for the future. Where do you see yourself? What do you want to be doing that you haven't done yet? And one of the things that you brought up to me in sort of our pre-interview talk was your need to really want to mentor young Canisius High School graduates and students, people that might be interested in reaching out to you to learn about the financial services field, or to learn about other things that you're interested in. I know you're a man of deep faith. I know that you are somebody that's involved in their church. And so, Tim, tell me a little bit about some of that desire. And then that'll be a great way for us to sort of close our interview, and the way you want to make yourself, available to some of our alums and people here at Canisius.
Sure. So I think it's important. I've been fortunate enough through our church to actually be a small group leader for middle school and even high school guys. So having seen that age group that sort of lays on top of what Canisius students are going through, I've enjoyed the interaction because I can share some things I've learned, be able to impart to them things they want to think about as they make decisions, and they're going to be confronted with things that, as you and I know, you get into your late teens, your 20s, your 30s, and now you're thinking about, what does my life look like?
Sure.
I want to at least be able to be an outlet for them, and know that there's a safe place they can communicate. So I do enjoy that. I take it seriously. I've got a young boy. I call him a young boy. He's a young man now. He's 20 years old. He's a sophomore in college. And I remember just yesterday, I was, coaching his 7-year-old T-ball team for several years. So it goes fast.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of questions that guys that are going through Canisius, that are teenagers, that are probably asking questions. We may not know each other, but if they feel like I'd like to just kind of tap Tim's brain to think about what I should be thinking about, whether it's financial services or just life. I just like to have the opportunity to be a resource for those guys if they want to entertain it. Let me leave you one thought, Andy, that I've shared, and this is maybe, I try to encourage young guys who are growing and thinking about life and what they should do and what they should stand for. And you mentioned faith. It's the most important thing to me. Christ is the center of my life. It's what's driven me and held me together on whether it's business or personal or both. But a verse that I use with young men, whether it's in coaching or it's in high school or it's even just peers of mine who are in their 50s, it's 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13. And it says, be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be men of courage, be strong. If I was to think about a verse that sort of captures what folks like Crusaders who are 16, 17, 18 years old, ready to take steps into the world, that's a good reminder of how you should think about the Lord working on your behalf and to stand firm for what you believe. So if I can be a resource, welcome that. And I appreciate the time to share with you today what my experience with the school has been. It's been fantastic.
And on our website, underneath our interview, I'll put some contact information there for anybody that wants to get in touch with you, Tim, and take you up on that very generous and kind offer. And I want to say thank you for spending some time with us today and sharing some of your wisdom and telling us your story. I hope I get to see you in Buffalo again soon. I know you still have some roots here, so please don't be a stranger if you're ever in town, and look forward to catching up at an alumni weekend or an alumni event soon. But thank you so much, and good luck in Atlanta.
Andy, thanks for the time today. Wish you all the best.
You well.